The mid-July sun beat down on the Aqua Vista community pool deck like a mallet on hot concrete. It was the kind of heat that made the chlorine shimmer and forced all sound into a heavy, muffled stupor. The perfect backdrop for a slow, agonizing descent into conflict. Ilara Vance, 46, clad in a blinding white Chanel-inspired swimsuit and a wide-brimmed straw hat, considered the pool deck her personal domain. As the unofficial, self-appointed Wellness and Standards Compliance Coordinator for the Aqua Vista Homeowners Association, HOA, her entire identity was tethered to the meticulous, unwavering enforcement of petty rules. Today, her target was a disruption to her carefully curated piece, a brightly colored, inflatable narwhal ridden by a giggling, red-headed girl who looked about 10. Sir, I need you to address this immediately. Ilara's voice, a surgically tight soprano, cut through the humid air. She marched across the imported Italian tile, her oversized sunglasses concealing eyes already narrowed in judgment. Major Caleb, Cal Thorne, 34, looked up from the military-grade hardback he was reading, a technical manual on logistics in high-risk environments. He was built like a slab of honed granite, his off-duty attire, dark blue trunks and a simple, fitted gray t-shirt, doing little to conceal the disciplined power beneath. He had only been home for 3 weeks on mandatory leave after a tour that had ended with more close calls than he cared to remember. His deployment adrenaline was still a low, insistent hum beneath the surface, making trivial civilian disputes feel like absurd theater. The little girl, Maya, Cal's niece, immediately deflated the pink narwhal and scrambled out of the pool, her small face etched with apprehension. Aunt Ilara said no fun floats, Uncle Cal, Maya whispered, clutching the damp plastic. Cal set his book down on his sun lounger with deliberate slowness. Ilara, good afternoon. That float is less than 18 inches in diameter and clearly marked in the HOA handbook as an approved personal water toy. Section 4, subsection B. Ilara didn't blink. She adjusted her hat, a theatrical gesture of superiority. The color, Major Thorne. The retina-searing pink is a violation of the aesthetic guidelines. It clashes with the community's approved Coastal Serenity palette. Furthermore, your niece is wearing a cotton t-shirt, which is against Section 2, Paragraph D, subsection 3. All pool wear must be 90% synthetic material to prevent lint buildup in the filtration system. Cal rose slowly to his full, imposing height. He didn't raise his voice, which only made his calm tone more chilling. Mrs. Vance, I am home for 96 days. I am required to decompress. My niece is spending the summer with me because her father, my brother, is still in physical therapy after a roadside device. We are attempting to have a peaceful afternoon. Is the color of a small plastic toy truly the hill you wish to die on today? The mention of his brother's injury was not meant to garner sympathy, but to establish the emotional landscape of the confrontation. This woman was arguing over decor while real people were dealing with real consequences. But Ilara saw only weakness, an attempt to manipulate her authority. Oh, a sob story. Wonderful. I'm so sorry about your brother, but tragedy does not exempt you from compliance. Perhaps if you spent less time traveling the world in uniform and more time reading the community bylaws, you would understand what a civilized society requires. The air snapped. Ilara had crossed the line from bureaucratic annoyance to outright personal insult. Cal felt the old, cold military discipline kick in, locking down the surge of protective anger. He had faced armed insurgents with better manners. That is neither relevant nor acceptable, Mrs. Vance. I am not in uniform, but I assure you, my professional understanding of compliance, regulation, and appropriate conduct significantly outweighs yours. You are creating a hostile environment for a minor, which is an infraction far more severe than the shade of pink. He glanced at Maya, who was now hiding behind his legs, tears welling up. Maya, go wait by the gate. I will be right there. Maya scurried away. Cal focused his entire attention on Ilara. Now let's address this hostile environment, Mrs. Vance. Ilara was emboldened by the small victory of driving the child away. She stepped closer, invading his personal space, her face contorted into a mask of righteous indignation. She smelled faintly of expensive coconut sun oil in desperation. "You won't address anything. I'm calling the HOA president right now. I know you military men think you can push people around, but here, I am the authority. I suspect you're not even a real major. Show me your credentials. Show me proof you're not some AWOL fraud trying to cause trouble in my neighborhood." This was the core of her problem. The uniform, even absent, represented an authority she could not control, and she hated it. Cal reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He didn't need to argue. He just needed to document. He activated the video recorder and held it steady at chest height. "I am Major Caleb Thorne. I reside at 14 Willow Bend. You are Alara Vance. You reside at 12 Willow Bend. It is 3:17 p.m. You are currently demanding private military credentials from me in a public space and making slanderous accusations. Everything you say from this moment forward is being recorded and will be submitted as evidence to the HOA board, the local precinct, and the Judge Advocate General's office, should you choose to press this further. I advise you to cease and desist." His calmness was his greatest weapon. It made Alara's frenzy look like a cheap performance. The sight of the recording light did not deter her. It inflamed her. She saw it not as a threat of consequence, but as a challenge, the final ignominious challenge to her perfect control. She had to seize his phone. "Stop the evidence. You do not record me. Give me that. You are violating my privacy." "I am a private citizen," Alara shrieked, her voice cracking with fury. She lunged forward, not to strike him, but to slap the phone out of his hand. It was a clumsy, lunging motion, fueled by adrenaline and a lifetime of being told no only by service staff. Cal did not move a muscle to block her or push her. He was trained to handle far more aggressive threats with minimal force. As Alara's hand swung wide, her focus entirely on his phone, her white espadrille sandals, tacky with the spilled ice water from his cup, lost their purchase on the wet, pristine tile. The forward momentum of her lunge, coupled with the slick floor, became a catastrophic rotational failure, a sharp, awful sound, a mixture of a high-pitched, "Oh!" and the scrape of her sandal was instantly followed by the heavy, sickening smack of her torso hitting the tiled rim of the pool. Just below the waist, before she toppled backward, her designer hat floating away like a sacrificial offering, SPLASH. The water instantly swallowed her scream and her expensive sunglasses. The entire confrontation, from the moment Alara lunged to the moment the water stilled, took less than 3 seconds. Cal stood over the pool, his phone still recording the empty space where she had been, now filled with the gentle, chlorine-scented ripple of the water. He didn't move to help. He simply watched the disturbance subside. A woman, 30 feet away, who had been lazily watching the conflict from her chair, gasped and dropped her paperback. She immediately scrambled for her own phone. Cal lowered his phone, the video file safely stored. He looked around. 3 people, all witnesses, were frozen, their faces horrified. He knelt by the edge of the pool, his expression still neutral, and spoke directly into the water, loud enough for the horrified witnesses to hear. "Mrs. Vance, that was an unprovoked physical assault documented on video. I will not be pressing criminal charges if you agree to a lifetime written ban from having any managerial or standards enforcement role within this community, effective immediately. If you attempt to file a false report of assault, I will release the unedited footage, and the consequences will fall squarely on you." He then glanced at the 3 witnesses, his eyes piercing. "She tripped and fell due to the wet surface after attempting to physically obstruct my documentation. Are we all clear on that, neighbors?" In the water, Alara resurfaced, gasping, coughing, and sputtering chlorinated water. But her face, now stripped of makeup and mascara, streaked with black tears, was not filled with panic from the near drowning. It was filled with pure, cold, incandescent rage. She wasn't wet. She was ruined. She wasn't just embarrassed. She was caught, exposed, and threatened with public disgrace. As she dragged herself up the steps, shivering, water pouring off her, she didn't argue about the fall. She focused on the threat. "You think you can stop me? You have no idea who you just messed with, Major. You just declared war on the wrong woman." Cal stood up, picked up his hardback manual, and looked down at the soaked, furious woman. He offered a slight, chillingly detached smile, the kind he reserved for an enemy who had just underestimated his capabilities. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat, "the only thing you've accomplished is giving me reason to extend my R&R paperwork. Now I have a project." He turned his back on her, leaving her dripping, defeated, and exposed on the white tile. He walked calmly toward the gate, where Maya was waiting, her eyes wide. He didn't look back, but he knew exactly what Alara Vance was planning. The twist was not the fall itself, which was a clumsy accident rooted in her own aggression. The twist was the immediate documented consequence, and the realization in Alara's eyes that her petty drama had just triggered a calculated, disciplined EI. Alara didn't scream when she got home. Screaming was messy, emotional, and yielded nothing. She stripped off the sodden ruin of her swimsuit and threw it, the wide-brimmed straw hat and the waterlogged espadrilles, into the master bathroom trash bin, a ritualistic disposal of evidence. Her skin was already blooming a deep, angry bruise just above her hip bone where she'd collided with the concrete lip. She barely noticed the pain. The only sensation that mattered was the bitter, corrosive sting of failure and humiliation. She was not just wet. She was defeated. And that man, that arrogant, cool-eyed major, had watched her fall and used her moment of weakness to issue a non-negotiable threat. He hadn't fought her in a civilian way. He had executed a tactical disengagement, documenting the terrain and utilizing the evidence as a legal IED. Alara sat at her polished mahogany desk, her fingers flying over her laptop. The war room of her life wasn't a battlefield. It was a desktop with multiple screens, spreadsheets, and the digitized bylaws of Aqua Vista. Her first target, HOA President Leonard Sterling. She typed furiously, weaving a narrative that was structurally sound but factually bankrupt. She did not mention the pink narwhal. She certainly did not mention the word lunge. Urgent, Major Thorne. A resident at 14 Willow Bend, engaged in deliberate and aggressive intimidation tactics, culminating in an unprovoked physical altercation at the community pool today, 3:17 p.m., she wrote. Upon politely requesting his niece comply with synthetic-only pool attire rules, Major Thorne became irate, demanding I show my credentials to enforce policy. When I refused to back down from his bullying, he intentionally used his physical size and presence to shove me, causing me to trip and sustain injury. This is a blatant violation of Community Safety Clause 7.1 and a potential criminal matter. I demand his immediate suspension of pool privileges and an emergency committee hearing to levy a fine commensurate with his shocking behavior. She hit send, savoring the feeling of the lie hardening into text. She knew Sterling was golfing, but this email would land with the necessary shock value. She attached 4 high-resolution photos of her hip bruise, claiming it was the result of the shove. Next, she called her husband, Richard, a commercial real estate lawyer who usually preferred to remain detached from her HOA nonsense. "Richard, I need you to listen. I've been assaulted by the military man at 14 Willow Bend. I need you to draft a cease and desist letter, professionally intimidating, that makes it clear any further contact from him will be met with maximum legal force." Richard, always calculating, sighed into the phone. "Alara, assault is a serious charge. Do you have a police report?" "It's being filed now. Just do the letter." "Frame it as a threat of litigation for battery, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We need to hit him hard and fast." Richard grudgingly agreed. Alara smiled a dry, brittle expression. The machinery of her vengeance was now turning. Thorne might be good at logistics, but he was dealing with the logistics of petty legal and bureaucratic power, her element. Meanwhile, less than a mile away, Cal was meticulously editing the video in his spare bedroom, now a temporary command post filled with maps, field guides, and stacks of military journals. He wasn't editing the substance. He was trimming the fat. He cut the video down to 45 seconds. The start of Alara's accusation, her slanderous comment about his uniform and the country, his recording declaration, her lunge, and the splash. The audio was crystal clear. He didn't need to argue. He only needed to present the evidence in a format that was impossible to debate. He drafted an email, Not to Leonard Sterling, too emotional, but to Apex Property Management, the professional agency that handled the HOA's liability. The subject line was surgical. Incident report, pool deck, Major Caleb Thorne, 14 Willow Bend, versus Laura Vance, 12 Willow Bend, documented attempted assault and liability risk. The body contained only 3 sentences and a timestamp. At 15:17 hours today, July 14th, I was subjected to an unprovoked verbal and physical confrontation by Ms. Alara Vance at the community pool. Ms. Vance attempted to physically seize my personal property while making false accusations, leading to her accidental fall. Due to her subsequent explicit threat to file a false report, this unedited video is attached for the official record and to mitigate future liability for the HOA and Apex Management. I request confirmation of receipt and documentation that this incident has been noted in Ms. Vance's file. He didn't mention her ban. He didn't mention her bruise. He didn't make a demand. He simply provided a legal shield for the management company, forcing them to side with the evidence to protect themselves. He hit send precisely 5 minutes before Alara's email landed in Leonard Sterling's inbox. The following morning, Leonard Sterling sat in his mahogany-paneled office, a man whose primary goal in life was to make it through Monday without being yelled at by anyone who signed a 7-figure check. He stared at his laptop, toggling between 2 wildly different documents. First, Alara's frantic injury-focused report, complete with a professional-looking cease and desist letter from Richard Vance's firm threatening litigation for battery. Second, Major Thorne's clipped professional email with the 45-second video attached. Sterling played the video. Alara's rage was astonishing. The aggressive lunge was undeniable. It was clear she was attempting to attack Cal's phone, not merely trip. The video ended with Cal kneeling and offering his deal, the lifetime ban in exchange for not pressing charges. Sterling played that last scene twice. He realized 2 things instantly. Alara Vance was a massive, unmitigated liability risk. Major Thorne was not only telling the truth, but he had executed the perfect counter move. He hadn't engaged in the argument. He had secured the evidence and leveraged it against the one entity that cared most about liability, Apex Management. Sterling didn't even need to call an emergency meeting. He called Alara Vance instead. "Alara, I have received your email, your photos, and the letter from Richard's firm," Sterling began, his voice flat. "I also have the unedited, time-stamped video footage from Major Thorne. I've watched it." A hollow, cold feeling started in Alara's stomach, chilling the expensive coffee she was drinking. "The footage? He fabricated that. That's an illegal recording." "No, Alara, it's not," Sterling interrupted, his patience gone. "It clearly shows you lunge at him in a clear attempt to grab his phone after insulting his military service. You slipped on the wet tile just as he reported to Apex. We are not paying for your mistake. In fact, due to the aggressive and slanderous nature of your report, I have been instructed by the management company to notify you immediately that your authority as Wellness and Standards Compliance Coordinator is suspended, effective immediately, indefinitely. You are prohibited from issuing any formal or informal warnings." He paused, letting the cold silence hang. "Furthermore, if Major Thorne decides to move forward with the police report for attempted battery, the HOA will not be providing any legal defense or support. You are on your own, Alara. You crossed the line, and you did it in full view of a camera." He hung up, the sound of the dial tone sounding like a judge's gavel. Alara stared at the phone. Her initial attack had failed. The legal bluff had been called instantly. Her bureaucratic power base, the very foundation of her control, had been vaporized by a single 45-second video file. She pushed back from her desk, the mahogany chair scraping against the marble floor. Her face was pale, no longer the sun-drenched crimson of rage, but the white of utter disbelief. Cal hadn't just defended himself. He had surgically removed her claws. "You want war?" she whispered to the empty, pristine office. "You have no idea what war is." Alara's mission shifted from simply getting Cal fined and suspended to destroying him. She needed a lever far more powerful than a pool toy or a corporate HOA policy. She needed to hit him where his discipline couldn't protect him. She needed vulnerability. She spent the next 48 hours doing something she had never done, research outside the Aqua Vista property lines. Using every social connection, every shady contact she had cultivated over decades of upper-crust social climbing, she started digging into Major Caleb Thorne's official record. She bypassed the standard military databases and went straight to the gray markets of information, old school friends, estranged spouses of his colleagues, financial records, anything personal. She found the usual: excellent service record, rapid promotions, clean slate. Nothing she could use. Then she targeted the one thing he cared about, the reason he was home, his brother, Nick Thorne. She found the accident report. The IED, the long list of injuries. It was devastating but useless. She kept digging into the peripheral details, the medical reports, the insurance filings, the post-incident documentation. She finally found a deep, protected file, a single page in a medical transfer manifest related to Nick's immediate emergency surgery in the combat zone. A small black box of information marked Incident Review Findings, Internal Use Only. Her breath hitched as she read the redacted summary. It wasn't about the bomb or the physical recovery. It was about protocol failure. The report alleged a catastrophic error in field judgment that unnecessarily exposed Nick Thorne's unit during the convoy, an error made by the convoy commander. The name attached to the role, unredacted in this particular file, was Major C. Thorne, Ilara L. He investigative journalist Marcus Vance, no relation, but Ilara appreciated the shared surname. It sounded like power, sat across from Ilara in a secluded booth at a dimly lit high-end steakhouse. Marcus, mid-50s, was a predator in a bespoke suit, his eyes constantly scanning the room, hungry for the next feeding opportunity. Ilara didn't waste time on pleasantries. She slid a sleek encrypted flash drive across the table. This is a single page from an internal Army medical transfer manifest. Redacted, but one name, the critical one, was left clear. It confirms a protocol failure review following an IED incident and names the convoy commander, Major Caleb Thorne. Marcus didn't touch the drive immediately. He just sipped his single malt scotch, his gaze fixed on Ilara. "And what's your angle, Ilara? You're risking a lot by leaking classified military documentation. This goes beyond a squabble over a misplaced shrub." "My angle," Ilara replied, leaning forward, her voice low and venomous, "is that Major Thorne is a menace to the community. He used his position to threaten and intimidate me after I attempted to enforce perfectly legitimate bylaws. He believes the rules don't apply to him, and I believe the public deserves to know what kind of reckless decision-making this hero is hiding under his uniform." She omitted the part where he recorded her attacking him. Marcus smiled, a cold professional gesture. He knew her motive was petty revenge, but the information was pure gold. A major, responsible for his brother's life-altering injuries, hiding behind an R&R leave. That's not a story, Ilara. That's a career killer. That's a scandal. I can guarantee front-page placement online by the end of the day. "Then do it," Ilara urged, the adrenaline rushing back, erasing the memory of the pool's cold shock. "Do it fast, and make sure the photograph is unflattering." Marcus took the drive. "Understood. Payment for the information goes through our usual anonymous channels. Consider this major's quiet life officially over." Cal and his brother Nick were in the middle of a brutal physical therapy session at the rehabilitation center. Nick was pushing his newly fitted prosthetic leg through a weight-bearing exercise, his face a mask of sweat and focused pain. Cal was spotting him, his hands hovering near his brother's shoulders, offering quiet, technical encouragement. "Keep your core tight, Nick. Don't compensate with the hip." "That's it. One more set," Nick grunted, his body straining. "Easy for you to say, Major. You still have all your original parts." Cal managed a rare, tight smile. "They're under warranty, not guaranteed. Focus." A younger soldier on the parallel exercise machine, scrolling through his news feed during a rest break, suddenly stopped scrolling. His eyes widened, and he let out a low, involuntary whistle. "Holy hell! Check this out, guys." Local paper just dropped a bomb. Title is, wait for it, The Cost of Command. Was a Major's protocol failure responsible for convoy attack and Hero Brothers' injury? The sound of Nick's prosthetic dropping abruptly on the rubber mat echoed in the momentary silence. Cal's blood ran instantly cold. A rush of familiar, high-stakes danger. The soldier, oblivious, read aloud, voice incredulous. A leaked internal Army document obtained by this publication suggests Major Caleb Thorne, currently on R&R in the Tampa area, was the convoy commander whose unauthorized deviation from standard operating procedure led directly to the ambush that severely injured his younger brother, former Staff Sergeant Nick Thorne. Nick didn't need to hear the rest. He slowly turned his head, his face stripped bare of concentration, replaced by utter shock and a terrible dawning suspicion. He looked at Cal. Cal. Protocol failure? Nick's voice was barely a whisper, a broken sound. He had been told the incident was unavoidable. Bad intelligence, bad luck, never a failure of command. What is he talking about? What document? Cal knew instantly precisely what document it was. It was the preliminary biased assessment, written by a bitter colleague, that the military had quickly dismissed but couldn't entirely erase from the records, the assessment he had spent 6 months fighting to have permanently sealed. He stepped away from Nick, his jaw locked. He looked at the soldier, his voice like ice. Staff Sergeant. Phone now. Shut it down. The soldier, recognizing the lethal command tone, fumbled to close the article and handed the device to Cal. Cal confirmed the source, the Gulf Coast Sentinel, a rag famous for sensationalism. But the core document was real. He looked back at Nick, whose eyes were fixed on the deep scar tissue wrapping the remainder of his leg. The physical pain of his injury was nothing compared to the psychological wound of betrayal. Nick, listen to me, Cal said, choosing his words with painful precision. It's a lie. It's a preliminary assessment that was discredited. It's nonsense. Was it protocol failure? Nick demanded, pushing himself up violently on the parallel bars, ignoring the searing pain. Yes or no, Cal? Did you make a call that put us on that road? The air was thick with the question Cal had spent months trying to bury, not for his career, but for Nick's peace. If Nick believed he was responsible, the emotional recovery would shatter. Cal didn't answer with words. He answered with the silence of a man caught in a terrible truth. The decision had been his. The failure, even if legally dismissed, was his cross to bear. I see, Nick breathed. The devastation complete. He let go of the bars and slumped back onto his seat, running a shaky hand over his crew cut. The narwhal. The pool. This is her. The psycho in the white hat. You didn't just fight her, Cal. You fought her over a toy, and she came back and killed my dignity. And you let her have the weapon. She won't get away with this, Cal growled, his entire body trembling with the desire to act, to eliminate the threat. Too late, Major, Nick said, shaking his head. The damage is done. Now you need to go. I can't look at you right now. Cal drove back to Aqua Vista, the pristine streets of the suburban community now looking like an enemy staging ground. The emotional devastation on Nick's face was the consequence, 1,000 times worse than any court-martial. This was no longer about rules or pride. This was about family, honor, and destroying a calculated act of malice. He bypassed his house and drove straight to 12 Willow Bend. Ilara's house was a fortress of beige stucco and manicured ferns. She was waiting for him. She had seen his black sedan pull up on the community camera feed. She opened the garage door slightly, just enough to step into the cool shade, a half-smile playing on her lips. She looked immaculate now, dressed in crisp linen pants and a silk tunic, her hair perfectly coiffed. She looked like the victor. Cal walked up the driveway, slow and deliberate. He stopped 10 feet from her, the sun setting behind him, casting her in the deepening shadow of the garage. The article, Cal stated, his voice a low, flat rumble that carried the weight of everything he had lost in the last 2 hours. Ilara fanned herself lightly with a small embroidered cloth. Oh, did you see that, Major? It's a shame when the truth comes out, isn't it? Such a damning little document. Apparently, your brother is quite distraught. You crossed every line of civilized conduct. This has nothing to do with the HOA, and everything to do with your grotesque ego. It has everything to do with the fact that you thought you could issue me demands and walk away clean, Ilara countered, her voice now sharp with triumph. I told you declared war on the wrong woman, and now I have achieved total strategic dominance. You have lost your family, and soon you will lose your career. And I'm still here, enjoying my beautiful, perfectly regulated community. Cal stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. But he did not touch her. He didn't need to. His physical presence was now merely a conduit for his terrifying focus. You believe that I have no recourse because you used a third party, a journalist, to commit this act of libel and malice? Cal said, his eyes glittering in the twilight. You believe you are protected by the distance of information warfare. You believe your life is as immaculate as your records? Ilara laughed, a short, sharp, triumphant sound. It is. Try to find one infraction, Major. Try to find one mistake. You'll find nothing but compliance and perfection. Cal tilted his head slightly, a small movement that suggested his entire focus was now locked onto her. When you were busy digging into my brother's military files, you missed something critical, Ilara. You looked up, but you didn't look down. You focused on my job, but you forgot about yours. The convoy commander is trained to look for every vulnerability, every point of failure, not just on the road, but in the enemy's support structure. His phone buzzed in his hand. He looked at the screen, a confirmation text from a contact he had initiated the second he heard the headline. The information was delivered. Your husband, Richard Vance, the real estate attorney? Cal continued, his voice softer yet more menacing. He's about to close a 7-figure acquisition on the old protected mangrove land down by the coast. The deal is contingent on a clear title, obviously. Ilara's smile faltered. Her eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I have friends in places where the HOA bylaws are less important than federal statutes, Cal said. Did you know that the coastal serenity aesthetic in Aqua Vista is dependent on Richard securing the deed to the neighboring wetlands? If that deal falls through due to, say, an unexpected environmental impact statement suddenly discovering protected marsh hen breeding grounds and significant zoning violations, Richard doesn't just lose the calm. The digital clock on the immaculate, custom-designed oven in Ilara's kitchen became her enemy. Every passing minute was a chisel chipping away at the foundation of her security. 3 hours. Cal Thorne hadn't just made a threat. He had given her a timeline for a hostile takeover of her financial stability. Richard Vance answered her call on the second ring, his voice tight and professional, betraying no immediate panic. Ilara, what is it? I'm in the final binding phase on the mangrove deal. I can't talk about HOA nonsense. Richard, it's not nonsense. You have to stop the coastal sanctuary purchase. Now. I need you to pull back. There's been a complication. Pull back? Richard's voice hardened into steel. Are you insane? I have an initial environmental report, legally filed and approved. That parcel is my quarterly bonus, Ilara. It's 7 figures. What complication could possibly necessitate losing millions in non-refundable earnest money? Ilara, already shivering despite the air conditioning, told him about Cal, the protocol failure article, and the counter threat, the sudden specific mention of marsh hens and zoning violations. She spoke quickly, stumbling over the technicalities, but the core fear was clear. Richard listened in silence, a silence more terrifying than any shouting. When he finally spoke, his voice was slow, glacial, and filled with deep, abiding contempt. I just received a priority notification from the county planning department. Not a stop order yet, but a query. A very detailed, pointed query regarding the specific density of migratory bird nesting within the planned construction zone, citing an anonymous and highly specific tip about uncatalogued nesting activity that voids our previous survey. This is not random, Ilara. This is the work of a professional, and it originated 45 minutes ago, precisely when that maniac walked away from your garage. The bottom fell out of Ilara's world. Cal hadn't been bluffing. He hadn't just threatened. He had already initiated the action. You brought a political, financial, high-level data attack to the one person who could launch one back, Richard continued, his words slicing through her composure. This is a man who manages logistics for a living. He doesn't send angry emails, Ilara. He executes. You didn't just argue with an army officer. You picked a fight with a strategist, and you did it over a pink inflatable toy. Richard delivered the final blow. I have to go into crisis mode to save the deal. And if I can't, we'll be facing an ethics inquiry. This is beyond my firm's liability. Consider this. If I lose this deal, you are why. And your little HOA throne is going to feel very cold when you're sitting on it alone. He hung up. The betrayal of Richard's measured, calculated response was worse than Cal's hostility. Richard had quantified her worth and found her lacking. Alara grabbed her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed Marcus Vance, the journalist. She needed the article gone instantly before Cal dropped the full EPA hammer. Marcus, I need you to pull the piece. Now. It was a mistake. I need a retraction immediately. Marcus was dismissive. Too late, Alara. It's trending. We have 1,000 comments, 500 shares. The military wire services are already picking it up. A retraction now doesn't just kill the story. It kills my reputation. And it makes your source, which is you, look like a desperate liar. I am legally protected by the highly placed source caveat. You, however, are now connected to the leak of a classified document. Alara felt the walls closing in. The cost of her revenge was now greater than the potential reward. Richard was distancing himself. Her financial safety net was dissolving, and Cal was still walking around the neighborhood, pristine and calm, having won the first crucial engagement. Meanwhile, the fallout hit Major Cal Thorne with the efficiency of incoming fire. He had barely stepped into his house when his phone rang, an encrypted line, Command Headquarters. The voice on the other end, Major General Hayes, was not friendly. Thorne, I'm looking at the Gulf Coast Sentinel. The words protocol failure and your name are making me very unhappy. The Chief of Staff is already fielding calls. You have 24 hours to make this article disappear, or I am recalling your leave, placing you under immediate formal investigation, and sealing that file permanently in a way that makes your future prospects resemble a dirt road. General, I understand, Cal said, standing rigidly in his hallway, his uniform hanging in a garment bag 10 feet away. It was a civilian harassment incident that escalated into a malicious information attack. The source is a local resident who illegally obtained internal paperwork. I have leveraged a counter-threat against her financial vulnerability to force a retraction. I will make this go away. Hayes was unconvinced. Make it go away, Major, and I want to know exactly how a civilian got hold of a preliminary review document. Your security is currently under fire. Fix it, or I will. Hayes disconnected. Cal's professional life was now tethered to the whims of Alara Vance, but the larger wound was personal. He drove back to the rehab facility, intending to talk to Nick, to explain the impossible field choice he had made, the logistical nightmare that made the safer route impossible, and the deep, cold reason why he had carried that burden in silence. He was met by a stern-faced physical therapist. Major Thorne, your brother has checked himself out of the facility. What? He's not cleared for discharge. He is now. He signed against medical advice. Said he had something more important to deal with. He left about an hour ago with a civilian acquaintance. Cal felt a visceral, twisting fear. Nick had spiraled before. Now, believing his injury was the result of his own brother's negligence, Nick was dangerously unmoored. The one thing Cal truly cared about, Nick's mental and physical recovery, was now severely threatened. Not just by the article, but by Alara's willingness to inflict psychological damage. Back in Aqua Vista, Alara had reached a dark, final clarity. She couldn't win the data war. Cal was faster, better protected, and his contacts were more powerful. If she retracted the story, she lost her dignity and still risked the EPA filing. If she didn't retract, Richard would divorce her, and they would lose their fortune. There was only one move left, the play of pure chaos. She went to her computer, pulled up the original video file of her falling into the pool that Cal had sent to the HOA, and transferred it to a sophisticated editing suite she used for her amateur community marketing videos. The video was 45 seconds of undeniable reality. Alara lunging, Alara falling, Cal standing still. But Alara knew what people saw, not what they knew. She spent the next hour working on the file, using subtle, professional-grade visual and audio tricks. She slowed the frame rate just before the lunge, added a faint, almost inaudible audio track of a sharp, whispered phrase she recorded on her phone, something just aggressive enough to be misinterpreted. She added a brief, heavy-handed zoom on Cal's face just before her foot slipped, freezing the frame for a split second to make him look menacing and towering. The final, doctored video was only 5 seconds longer, but it told an entirely different story. It was the story of a fragile woman being backed into a corner by an aggressive, physically imposing man, a man whose disciplinary history was already publicly under fire. It wasn't attempted battery anymore. It was aggressive intimidation leading to physical distress. She picked up her phone and redialed Marcus Vance. "Marcus, listen closely. I want you to ignore the protocol failure story for now. I have the real video, the one Major Thorne threatened me with." He recorded the incident himself. "I am coming to your office now, and I am bringing evidence that proves his alleged protocol failure wasn't on the battlefield. It was sexual harassment and psychological abuse in our civilian neighborhood, culminating in his attempts to entrap me after I fell." Alara didn't wait for a response. She grabbed the flash drive, her face set in a manic, frightening smile. The stakes were no longer wealth or reputation. They were survival. If she couldn't win the information war, she would burn down the entire battlefield, taking Cal, his career, and every bit of his meticulous, disciplined honor with her. The headline dropped at 19 hours, faster and more venomous than the previous one. Video proof: aggressive major intimidates woman into pool. Allegations of psychological abuse. Follow dismissed protocol failure. Alara watched the comments light up on Marcus Vance's live feed from the safety of her car, parked 2 blocks from the news office. The response was immediate, visceral, and exactly what she wanted. People saw a towering man in the frame, his face frozen in a stern zoom, a fragile-looking woman flinching, followed by the dramatic splash. The audio track, featuring her carefully inserted, desperate whisper, solidified the narrative of victimhood. The public didn't care about marsh hens or financial fraud. They cared about spectacle and power dynamics. Cal's disciplined silence was now painted as terrifying entitlement. "He recorded it to threaten her," the comments screamed. "Toxic masculinity in uniform." Alara drove home, a surge of manic, victorious energy fueling her. She had detonated the final weapon, and the blast radius was engulfing Major Thorne. She had chosen self-preservation through calculated destruction. Cal was already packed. His duffel bag lay by the door, his uniform immaculate. General Hayes had called him 20 minutes after the new video dropped. "You're relieved of command, Major." Hayes's voice was heavy, official. "Immediate report to Fort Myer for investigation. The media firestorm is too hot to handle at a local level. That video, manipulated or not, is a clear violation of conduct. You're under orders. Move." Cal felt a deep, cold ache. Not for his career, he could rebuild that, but for Nick. He had fought a meticulous war for nothing. He had won the legal battle against Alara, only to lose the public narrative and his brother's trust. He was about to walk out the door when his phone buzzed. It wasn't the military. It was a text from an anonymous number followed by a time-stamped location, the Aqua Vista pool deck. 2030 HRs. The text contained only 3 words. "Vance has evidence." Cal paused. He looked at the duffel bag, then at the time. He had 20 minutes before he was officially AWOL. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed his keys and drove. Alara arrived home to a house that was silent, but not empty. Richard was waiting for her in the living room, sitting on a pristine white sofa, a black leather briefcase resting on his knee. The overhead lights were off. The room was bathed in the cold blue light of the plasma TV, which was running a loop of Marcus Vance's article featuring her video. "Did you see it, Richard?" Alara said, throwing her keys onto the marble console. Her voice was slightly high, bordering on hysterical relief. "It's everywhere. He's finished. The deal is safe." Richard didn't move. He looked like an accountant calculating a massive, unavoidable loss. "The deal is dead, Alara, and no, it is not safe." It's been DOA since you decided to tamper with evidence and leak classified material to a sensationalist rag. Ilara stopped laughing. What are you talking about? I bought us time. I took the focus off the zoning issue. Richard opened the briefcase and pulled out 2 flash drives and a stack of legal papers. You bought us 2 hours of libel, Ilara. The federal authorities are already looking into the source of the protocol failure leak. The moment Marcus Vance releases your name as the source, you're looking at a world of hurt that makes the EPA look like a parking ticket. He held up the first flash drive. This is the video you sent to Marcus Vance, the one where he looks like a predator and you look like a victim. It's a work of art, actually. The frame rate manipulation is masterful. He held up the second drive. This is the original, unedited, time-stamped video you sent to Leonard Sterling and Apex Management, which I legally obtained this afternoon using a preemptive subpoena to secure our firm's liability before your circus started. It shows you, under clear lighting, lunge at a standing officer and fall. He stood up, looking down at her, the distance between them now absolute. I didn't care about your HOA wars. I cared about my financial security and my reputation. You destroyed both by escalating a pink narwhal incident into a federal matter. That man, Major Thorne, gave you a clear way out. Retract the story and let him go. You doubled down, chose malice over money, and destroyed my 7-figure deal in the process. He dropped the stack of papers on the glass table. Those are the divorce papers, Ilara, effective immediately. I've already contacted my contacts at the HOA and Apex. I'm giving them the original video and a statement explaining your actions and my complete lack of involvement in either the leak or the video manipulation. I'm saving the firm. I'm saving myself. And I'm making sure you pay for the fallout. Ilara stared at the documents, her face dissolving from victorious manic energy into naked, crushing horror. The foundation of her existence, her marriage, her wealth, her social standing was gone, wiped out not by her enemy but by the cold, calculated self-interest of her husband. At that precise moment, Major Cal Thorne pulled up to the curb. He saw Richard's car, the lights on in the living room, and the tension emanating from the house. He walked up the pristine pathway, driven by instinct. He saw the scene through the large window. Ilara, standing motionless, staring at the divorce papers, and Richard, briefcase in hand, delivering the final devastating indictment. Cal saw the raw, absolute defeat on Ilara's face. The strategic objective was achieved. Richard Vance had delivered the karmic justice. Cal didn't need to intervene. He turned to leave, but as he did, Richard stepped out the front door, closing it softly behind him. He saw Cal standing there in his major's uniform, an almost spectral figure in the sodium glow of the streetlights. Richard stopped, his lawyerly instincts instantly recognizing the enemy strategist. "Major Thorne," Richard said, his voice quiet. "You are a dangerous man. You cost me millions, but you are predictable." She was not. She chose to burn the house down. Consider the articles retracted. Consider her career in the community and outside of it terminated. I filed the documents with the police and Apex. You'll have the evidence you need to clear your name by tomorrow morning. He didn't wait for a reply. Richard Vance walked to his car, leaving the house, his marriage, and his liability behind him. Cal looked back at the window where Ilara was still standing in the blue light, defeated. He realized the most chilling thing. She hadn't fallen in the pool accidentally. She had engineered her own downfall by refusing to accept defeat. He walked back to his sedan, the weight of the moment heavy on him. He had won the war, but the cost was still high. He drove away from Aqua Vista, not toward Fort Myer, but to the one place he had to go first. He found his brother Nick sitting alone by the quiet, darkened bay, staring at the water. Cal sat down beside him. He didn't offer excuses. He didn't mention the video, Ilara, or the media. "It wasn't bad intelligence, Nick," Cal finally said, his voice flat with exhaustion. "It was a command decision. We had 15 minutes. The safer route was blocked by a civilian convoy. I took the quicker, more exposed route because I calculated we could get through before the window closed. I was wrong. The intelligence was old. It was my call. It was my failure." Nick looked at his brother, not with anger now, but with the painful, cold clarity of acceptance. And you carried that just to save me from hating you? Cal simply nodded. Nick looked out at the dark water. The media war had ended, the marriage had been destroyed, and the major had been recalled. But the real protocol failure, the one that mattered, was finally out in the open. Good, Nick finally said, his voice thick. It's about time we talked about it, Major. Now I have to figure out where I'm going to stay. Cal stood up, his military precision returning, but mixed with a deep, weary humanity. You're coming with me to Fort Myer. You'll be my primary witness and my motivation. We finished the recovery together. Cal Thorne, the strategist, had finally faced his greatest failure and secured his most critical asset. As he drove away from the water, the general's order awaiting him, he knew he was walking into a court-martial, but he was no longer walking in darkness. Ilara's malice had forced his hand, delivering him a temporary professional ruin, but leading him back to the honesty and duty he had desperately needed.